Okay, welcome all of you to this social design event. Just to get a bit of an understanding of who's in, for who is this the first visit to Dutch Design Week? Can I see some hands? Really? Are you all first-timers? Okay, and who's a frequent visitor? Okay, and who considers himself a social designer? That's quite a bit. Okay, let's test that immediately. So what's a social designer for you?
Wow.
There you go.
For me, it's the involvement of the user or the target group in the whole process. So from the start until the end. And it's also the impact you make.
Okay, impact. Nice. Someone else? I saw more hands here. Come on. Yeah, there you go.
For me, social design is more that you look to the situation, that you make situations better, and that you implement this, and not only in the cultural sector, but also at companies.
Okay, not so shy. It sounds really good. Anyone else? Yeah?
I think it's about solving wicked problems.
Wow. Let's see if we can do that. Solving wicked problems. First, some practicalities before I guide you in the program. Did you all take a workshop card? A colored card at the entrance? Oh gosh, there we go. Well, you have to pick up one at the break. Who did pick up a card? All right. For all of you that did pick up a card, I would like you now to hand it over to the people that didn't get a card. So just give it to the people next to you. Then we start this in a very nice social manner. All right, this creates the chaos I expected. This was just a joke. Because hopefully you did make a deliberate choice for a workshop. There are 3 breakouts. And they are really carefully designed for you. And I will explain them later. But there is enough space for all of you. You will get a short explanation. And there are enough seats for all of you. So don't worry, don't get stressed. And if you like to swap, then please do so. But this was just a joke. We have a really nice program for you. It is compiled by all these really good organizations. The Stimuleringsfonds, Design Europe Awards, Nicky and Afdeling Buitengewone Zaken. They already co-created this program with the 4 of them, but actually a lot of social designers, small SMEs were part of this program as well. So great job for all of you to co-create this. And they selected actually these people that are sitting there, really excited to kick off this first lecture. And I would like to start with you, because the 3 of you will give a short lecture. Then we have a small, short conversation, and please engage in that. We have a debate coming up, a short break, and another round of conversations. So bear with me, and I would like to give the floor first to you, Neele Kistemakers from MUZUS. You will tell us more about, and I have to check, mobility for elderly and the disabled. Floor is yours.
Thanks. Yeah, there I am. And, well, many people said they're first-timers in Dutch Design Week. I think with all the fuzz about social design, all of a sudden this year I feel a bit like a first-timer too, although I've been, in a way, doing this kind of work already for over 10 years. But don't feel bad. We're all we're all new when it comes to the next project. So, and it's called passenger transport, but as you already said, it's more about mobility services for elderly and disabled. A project for the municipality of Rotterdam. Passenger transport sounds a bit more like the other project that we did about people trafficking, and that's a different topic. I'm going to see if this works, because I put it in my pocket. Yes, it works. So what I'm going to talk to you about is a project that we did a few years back, in which the municipality of Rotterdam had to renew a contract for the mobility services for the disabled. So that's the people who are in the so-called taxi buses that go to special schools, to care facilities, for example. Or just to friends. And because of the decentralization, if that's an English word, all of the all of the forms, different contracts, were all of a sudden the responsibility for the municipality. So it was no longer the country or the province responsible for the contracts, but everything was all of a sudden with the municipality. And that meant it was quite big. It was a 217 million contract, and the municipality actually had no clue who the people on the bus were. So that's what we helped them out with. Then there were actually a few interesting characteristics to this specific project. First of all, tendering such a big contract is usually a very traditional process, and usually mostly a legal process. And then the second characteristic, that both the transportation sector and the municipality himself are quite traditional in their approach of these big tenders. But then the third characteristic was that in this case, the municipality really wanted to take a different approach. They wanted to know the vision of the people on the bus. They were not writing a tender, they were trying to put the user, the end user, central in the whole process. They were looking for not just a transport or a mobility supplier, they were looking for combinations of suppliers. And they also chose a very innovative form of tendering. It's called it's a dialogue form of tendering called concurrentiegerichte dialoog in Dutch, in which you do not present an assignment, but in which you, in dialogue, sort of develop the concept that is in the end being performed. So the challenge, as I already said, was quite big. The municipality knew that there were 30,000 rides a day, but they approached us to get a bit more of an insight of this rich world of the user themselves. So who were the people on the bus in order to create a solid base for the whole innovative mobility tender. So why did they come to us? We are designers, but we never go straight from what's going on, the problem, to the solution. We always research the why, research the user needs, because we believe that when you understand people's motivations, you can bring these facts, for example, these 30,000 rides to life, and then design a solution that is valuable for the situation. So what did we do? We started exploring the people on the bus, the world of mobility of elderly and disabled in the municipality of Rotterdam. And what we think is such a perfect toothpaste smile situation that you see in this picture is something you hardly ever come across. And in real life, this is one of my colleagues' home. The challenges are multiple and very specific also. And what we wanted to do is for the municipality to get a rich understanding of these specific challenges, but not from the disabled perspective, but from a mobility perspective. So we use context mapping to do that. We create a fresh perspective by diving into latent needs of people, and we actually designed a few specific steps for the municipality of Rotterdam to use these techniques. First of all, we did a postcard campaign at all sorts of locations. So we went to care facilities, we went to the special schools that disabled children go to, we went to elderly homes, etc. And we actually first wanted to get a feel for the needs of specific groups of people, for example, the elderly, or people making use of a specific kind of care, also match with what they like or dislike about their mobility, or are that totally different things and therefore different groups. Then from there on, we conducted numerous in-depth interviews with the users, but also with caregivers, with planners for the transportation system that was already running, with drivers also. And then, using all the data, we looked at how can we develop a framework that helps us to understand the user needs from a mobility perspective, but not requiring us to remember all these individual clients as a whole. And what we noticed here is that the municipality was an extremely involved client, and I think that that is why this could become a best practice in the first place. Because we did a bit of the work around this huge tender, but the municipality actually had a team that just wanted to do things differently, that wanted to make a change within this specific system, and therefore were super involved in the interviews already, but also in this part where we decided on what are we going to use as a base for this new system that the mobility suppliers were going to provide. So what you see here is that we were looking for the relevant patterns. And what was very interesting is that we coded the different stories from people who were allowed these mobility services from a specific disability or a mobility law perspective. So you see that the greens, for example, were all elderly, the red ones were all children, the yellow ones were, for example, the people coming in from the WMO side. And what we saw very clearly is that it all mixed up when it came to mobility needs. And then we faced a next puzzle, actually. What aspects of mobility were most important to use as a denominator in this framework? So we looked, for example, at their mobility pattern or the structure of their week. We looked at what kind of support means do they bring. Are they in a wheelchair? Do they have other things that they bring along, or do they have luggage that is always with them, a dog maybe? Or how much mental support do they need, for example, during the whole journey? And what we saw is that there was actually a spectrum of mobility needs. We couldn't really, where we often as an agency come up with this cross of access that sort of divides the user group into a few quite specific groups. We saw that here all the clients were actually in their individual spot. But what we did notice is that in some areas, for example in the blue area, there were similar stories. And for the other areas as well. So we decided to create 4 profiles to summarize these dense areas in the spectrum, but very specifically all the time communicate that there was this whole spectrum of individual needs that you really could not set aside. So then the third step was the tendering process. So usually our third step is a design step, but in this case we were not the one who were going to design this mobility service. The transportation companies and their mobility partners were going to do that. But what we did discover is that where in the traditional situation, municipalities usually tender these kinds of assignments, projects, these kind of tenders, just based on price per kilometer, just based on how much time can a driver take or be early or late at the client's house. But what we discovered in the stories of all the people that we spoke to is that actually there are so many steps in preparation or in booking a ride that are as important as the ride itself. And that was a very important insight for the team at the municipality. They said this is something that we need to use as well, the base actually for the new services. And where we until now pay or reward the mobility services that are running on the ride itself, it now became a much bigger a field of different steps that they could use to steer good mobility. And what you also saw happening is that where focus is often on the actual content, the surface of a specific step, the communication about the surface was actually most important to most of the people who were going to use the bus. For example, making a phone call to know at what time the driver would arrive had to be followed by a reassurance that he was really going to be there at that time and that they were going to be picked up at a specific time. Because we saw situations where someone, for example, would already be outside in snow for an hour just because they didn't want to miss the bus. So there was also an eye-opener. And then what we did is, per profile, we looked at this whole customer journey and we saw that different steps in the journey were actually most crucial to a specific part of the spectrum of mobility needs. So this was the base for the whole tendering process, and then this concurrentiegerichte dialoog came into play. First, they organized 3 market consultation days where the transportation companies could get to know the personas, could get to know the customer journeys, but they could also get to know each other. And the team at the municipality deliberately set these days up as a informal get to know, for example, an IT partner or get to know a care partner in order to also become a consortium in the tendering process. And then 3 parties or 3 consortia were selected, and they went through a process of 10 months in which there were 10 rounds of dialogue days with these 3 consortia, and they were all attached to the specific phases from the customer journey. So there were 2 rounds about booking a ride. There were 2 rounds about preparing your trip. There were 2 rounds about the ride itself, and 2 rounds about the way back. And there were 2 rounds about the legal contract aspects of this specific tender. So what happened is that these 3 parties could present their concepts from a user perspective to the municipality, and they immediately got evaluated and feedback from the municipality, but also from us as design researchers, in order to come back a few months later for the same topic, but with a better concept. So it was actually a very iterative process that led to travel. Yes, travel. A consortium of not only mobility suppliers, but also parties that were involved in well-being, in care, and in research and evaluation to ensure that it was not only a concept that was good at the moment of tendering, but that would stay good for about 7 years. So with this project, we won a service design award, but I must say that even though this is a design prize, and I'm here as a social designer, it was actually due to the team at the municipality that we could, well, make this into a best practice, because that was actually the best cooperation that we ever had. Thank you very much. I think that was 15 minutes.
That was really sharp in time. Have a seat. I guess there are a couple of questions you would like to pose. There is time for that after these 3 presentations. So if you're okay with that, then I would like to call forward Elisa Otañez. And you will talk about the yellow spot. Yeah. So the floor is yours.
Well, hi. First of all, thanks for having me here. I'm very excited to share a stage with other social designers. And, well, just a brief introduction. I just did a master in social design in Design Academy, where I graduated from last year. And this is what I'm going to be talking about, my graduation show, which is called Yellow Spot. This is a public toilet for women that I designed in response to the lack of toilets for women here in Eindhoven. So I want to show you a little bit about how it all started and kind of in a story talk about the process that I took and the outcome that I had. So yeah, I'm going to be also focusing a lot on issues around the rights of women in cities and some other political aspects of all of this. And well, this all started when I noticed these urinals for men here in Eindhoven. I've never seen them before, so I was very curious about them. I thought that it was a good solution, but then I asked myself if there were any public toilets for women, free of use. So I started by doing kind of like a mapping of the city, just going around, and I decided to start counting them. So I could find around 10 of them in the city, and all free of cost. So I decided to look for a toilet for women, and I could only find one that is here in the city center, and it's at a cost of 50 cents. So here I started to get some ideas of where the project could take me. Usually women can go into restaurants or bars, but we do run the risk that they either ask us to pay or tell us that it's not available for us. But this is not only an issue happening here in Eindhoven, it also happens in our schools, in parks, and in other events. For example, this was during the Pride Parade in Amsterdam last year, where like this queue took like 25 minutes just to use one toilet. So in the image you can see the comparison of that during events or in certain constructions in buildings. It is like there's the idea that you should place one toilet for women and one for men. But the truth is that this has 4 spots that obviously, yeah, they take up less space and less time. So I wanted to kind of work on the idea of how can I make this problem visible, first of all. And yeah, for example, it takes more time to go to a bathroom as a woman because you have to open and close the door. You sometimes have to clean the toilet seat, take off your clothes and put them back on. So in general, it takes up even twice as much to use a toilet as a woman. So like these are ideas that we already have in ourselves that we don't really think about or question. So that's the path that I wanted to take. So I started to look into what have other people done before with the topic, because obviously I wasn't the first one that noticed. So this was a protest that this woman made recently in the train, because it turns out that the new trains from Arriba did not have a toilet. So that was just incredible for her. So that's what she did. She made like this type of protest where she just took her bucket, very simple, and kind of exposed herself to show how ridiculous it is that there's no toilet. So I really got inspired by the idea of how can we exaggerate it, or how can I really put it out there in a very notorious way. But the most known problem with this, you probably know about her. This is Gerte Biening. She got fined in, I think it was 2015, she got fined in Amsterdam for public peeing. And this really took off a lot because she refused to pay the fine because she said that it was not fair. She had to use the toilet, but the closest one, I think, was like 25-minute walk. And she really needed to go, so she just decided to pee in public. Like, to be honest, a lot of men already do, so that's what she did. And she got fined for that. And she went to court, and the judge did agree to reduce the fine, but he said that she still needed to pay it. Because this is what he said, that she could have still used the urinal for men. So this gives us an idea of how cities usually are designed by and for men. And yeah, also usually there's not so many women in decision making or in politics or in city planning. So I think that this was a really clear example of it. So I want us to look at the urinals that the judge was talking about. I don't know if any of you women have tried to pee in one of these. Do you think it's safe, clean? I honestly wouldn't do it. So there's a woman called Kathleen that she started this big protest around Holland. So she called for all women all around the country to document how this is quite impossible, no? So for my design process, kind of going into the social aspect of it and the protest part of the issue was very important for me. But this is not a new topic. So, this is Kathleen, which is the woman that started this protest in 2017. But this has been happening since the 70s. This is the Dolemina, a feminist activist group that were already protesting for the demand of public toilets for women. So what does this tell us? That this is like a vicious loop in history that keeps repeating itself. It's not a linear timeline, but it's just something that keeps coming up. So one would wonder, why would men get provided with the service after they started peeing outside, no? So I'm just wondering, what do women need to do in that case? We shouldn't be peeing outside in demand for toilets, so there must be another way. So I just started to take different directions at the beginning of the project to kind of expand all my possibilities. So I started to think about how a public toilet for men and for women could look like a shared space between both of them. I thought of how different ground levels could come into play, because men have a different eyesight than women, so that makes us more vulnerable. So there's a lot of little different aspects in how toilets are designed that we haven't thought about. So I started thinking of how you would feel if you would be peeing with a woman beside you or in front of you or kind of in diagonal. So it's all these elements that we can still think of. And I made just little props in the city, and because I wanted people to kind of experiment it, and I wanted to listen what they had to say. So I just made some experiments with just elements that I had in hand to see the reaction of people, and also some other exercises. For example, how we are not allowed to pee in the city. That's why we see these deflectors all around. And I was just thinking, how can I invert that into a corner that you're permitted to pee in? But at the end, I wanted to show this problem, to make it visible, because it's quite invisible, but at the same time, try to solve it. So I started to speak to women. I made some polls, and these are some numbers that I found out. That 85% of women say they use public toilets only for peeing, so that was a good insight. 61% of women don't sit down while they're using a public toilet. Maybe some of you do, but the majority of them said they didn't. 44% of women say that maybe they would use a urinal for women. But the truth is that 100% of us need to pee. So we're half of the population, and it's quite impressive that we are not provided with public toilets. So yeah, part of my process was also to kind of put myself in this position of vulnerability. So if you don't have a public toilet, just make one yourself and take it with you. No? So I just put a jerry can and a funnel together, and this was in a park in Amsterdam, and I tried it out with a long skirt, obviously, because you need privacy. So it was quite okay. And then I really got inspired in the idea of the jerry can, because it's a very iconic object that has been around for such a long time. And I started to think about how it could look, because it's something that I could carry with myself. I thought that it shouldn't be too big, because if it gets full, it's hard to carry with you. But it shouldn't be too small, because it needs to contain liquids. So I just started to prototype and to think of what shape and form, also with the function that it should have. And I also thought of the privacy aspect of it, because we obviously need a place to keep ourselves safe. At the same time, I wanted to keep the element of like protest and how I could use this booth of a toilet as a sign that I would go outside and protest for toilets for women. I also got inspired in this project by Wodishko, which he designed a house for homeless people, but he made it clear that it's only a temporal issue, that this shouldn't be happening. So this element for me was also very important to say that it's the responsibility of cities, not of just citizens to come up with their own solutions, which is also okay, but it's cities that need to provide with this. So I went from the container to thinking how this could be transformed into a portable toilet independent of sewage systems and that I would be able to carry it with me. Also, it doesn't have a seat because, as I mentioned before, most women don't sit down. So I thought of ways that current toilets could be redesigned for public spaces for the use of women. So I just want to show a video. These are just some images, but you will be able to see the video, which is after this one. I don't know if someone is able to play it.
The city is a public home for everyone, and as in homes, toilets are needed. Public toilets are the links that connect every activity, enabling us to remain in the city. In Eindhoven, there are 10 free urinals for men. Women represent almost half of the population. Nevertheless, they have access to only one public paid toilet. This is a form of coercion and discrimination from public space. If peeing is a necessity for both men and women, why are women not acknowledged? The yellow spot is a toilet that covers peeing needs of women that are currently not offered by the city. It is a portable toilet, waterless and off the grid, independent from sewage systems, which allows autonomy and flexibility of location. The yellow spot is an alternative model of city making. Functionally, it solves the urgent need for females to pee in the city, and at the same time, it is a protest that demands provision of toilets.
When I have that problem, I just go into a restaurant.
The toilet's presence disrupts the urban fabric. Its language of impermanence indicates that its functions have to become permanent, suggesting that appropriate toilets are needed.
Maybe it's because everybody knows we don't have any other options. I don't know.
It's not something you see on the market normally.
Altogether, noticing an improvised toilet for women in a first world country reveals the privilege of men.
Two guys, they were standing on the road and we were sitting on the edge of the stream, and it was hilarious because nobody dared to pee.
When you put it in a place where people expect a thing like that to be, it's not really rebellious, but yeah.
The yellow spot represents the inequality that women still undergo in public space. And it is a catalyzer for change that aims to obtain dignifying toilets for women in cities.
So yeah, this is just the last part. I'm just gonna close. I just want to mention that toilet for women should be safe, private, accessible, affordable. It should take care of menstrual needs, and it has to meet the needs of caregivers. So this is how I imagine the toilet for women in public spaces. And I just want to invite you to kind of push it a little bit. If you see that some event or organization is not considering the needs of women, that you see a long line in the women's bathroom, just get into the men's bathroom. If it's safe and you feel okay doing it, just do it. And we have to take up more space to kind of make people uncomfortable a little bit. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. You love this project, I guess. You even draw it, right? Can you give a short response?
Oh, I don't. I can't. It's really good.
All right, let's leave it with that now. We move from mobility to toilets to psychiatry. We're going to redesign that with Matthijs van Dijk from Reframing Studio. You're all ready, I think, so I leave it up to you, Matthijs.
Okay, thanks. Two things maybe beforehand. So where's Jan? Because he told me that he would give me a sign 12 minutes before I kind of, so Jan's over there. Jet Buitengewone, is she here, the previous minister? Because I'm going to bash her later, so maybe she can prepare also beforehand. What I try to do, so yes, on the program, it's told that I'm going to talk about redesigning psychiatry. But that's such a huge project to talk about in 15 minutes. And that's why I agreed on with Jan to mainly kind of like talk about my learnings from that big project that kind of relates to social design. So that's a little bit the idea. I'm one of the founders of Reframing Studio in Amsterdam, so we work with 14 people. So what I'm telling you is the result of not what I'm doing, but what we are doing. And it's also the result of working together, exactly what Neele is saying. So you work together with so many people. So the results that I'm not presenting now is not the outcome of a design office, but it's the outcome of people working together, which is rather social, you can say. And maybe only to give you an understanding of the things we're working on now. So yes, we're working on psychiatry, so it's the future of psychiatry. We work on a project for the Ministry of OCW's education, on information. But we also work on a project that relates to the inclusive labor market. We do something about citizenship, so we work together with the government, the local government of Trondheim, that's Norway, and they became a center of excellence of the United Nations to see how the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, relate to citizenship. And last, maybe to mention, is also we work on biodiversity, and here you see there's so many topics you can work on. So if you want to become, or if you are already a social designer, it's this amazing kind of diversity of topics you can be involved in, and I like it so much. But what also often happens, and this photograph I took in Amsterdam, it's only now 2 months ago, and it says, why does social engineering always end up in nefarious disaster? And I think I agree, yeah? So I think I agree that we all try to do good, but in the end we're not capable of doing good. And how come? And this is a little bit what I want to say. So I thought I come with 5 findings that it kind of relates to the hand that I just showed you, because I think the hand is such a beautiful metaphor for making, yeah? So it's with our hands we make a world that matters. But how to do that? How to avoid creating disaster instead of beauty? That's a big question to answer. So what I first kind of start with is where my career started too. And it's with this photograph. And do you know what it is or not? It's Rodney King, exactly. And what happened with that whole issue? Because at the time, Rodney King was demolished by policemen. We all spoke like, this can't happen anytime anymore, yeah? So we can't allow happening this. And in the end, it only became even worse. And I think it's all about that having good intentions is not good enough. You understand? So when you think about a society and when you think about also the future of psychiatry, of course we all wish people to be happy. But is that wish already good enough to make a society that is worthwhile living in? That's I think, a completely other thing. So what I want to say, so at the first tip I want to give is like, the first tip is, no, it's not about having good intentions. It's about understanding. It's about unravel the complexity of topics you're going to work on. I had this talk with Neele, and she's working on a project now for the VNG with a mayor. And before you know, and that's exactly what Neele told me, before you know it, they think you're just going to solve a problem for them. And often the problem is only one of a possible side effect that is kind of hidden in something completely different. Yeah? It's the same with the Rodney King case. It's not about only policemen kind of trying to do harm to a black guy. So that's my first tip. And also kind of be careful not to become too idealistic, or idealism often is kind of leads to disaster too. So be careful, so be realistic, yeah? And what realism is all about is that you understand beforehand what you can manage with a society, what kind of transition is possible. It's so important that you know. Okay, my second tip, it starts with this strange painting by Paul Klee. You know this painting or not? Have you ever seen it? It's a famous painting because this painting became a metaphor for Walter Benjamin. And Walter Benjamin was a philosopher. And what he saw in this painting is like he saw this as a metaphor what progress is all about. And what he saw is like, he saw, so the painting is called Angelus Novus, the new angel. And what he saw in this painting was like, so of course the eyes are wide open. So what Walter Benjamin was seeing, he saw this kind of angel blown away by storms from heaven, and this angel is blown away from what he's called the present into the future. But he's blown away into the future with his back to the future because he's still looking at the past. He looks at all disasters being created by mankind. And I think, so I fully understand why Walter Benjamin at the time came up with this understanding of progress. That's a 12-minute sign. Okay. But that was in 1940, yeah? So, of course, I understand that this understanding of what progress is related to how you look at the past. And how, in this case, this angel is almost powerless doing something because she's blown away into the future. So she doesn't have any kind of means anymore to change something about it. And I think that's my tip too. My second tip is about, okay, when you think about social design, maybe you should not distance from the past, but you have to create something for a future. And it sounds very obvious, but I think we still do problem solving constantly. And maybe you have to ask yourself, if we solve all problems of today, do we create a society that matters? I don't think it is. So I truly think that if we put all kind of effort now in solving all problems, that we have a society that really sucks. Huh? So please be careful not to drown in problem solving. Okay, number 3. I need a little bit of water. It's a little bit of a scary photograph, but it's Steven Pinker. Why do I show Steven Pinker? Because I was talking about this image of Walter Benjamin. He used this painting of Paul Klee about progress is kind of distancing from disaster from the past. Maybe the big question is, can we create a world that is better, or can we create a world that matters? That's the big question. Because maybe, so I don't know, there's this wonderful book about Simone de Beauvoir, and she's writing about a guy who drinks a live poison, something in the 9th century, and because of it, he doesn't die anymore. And Simone de Beauvoir kind of describes his life as he can kind of create new things that matter to a world, but there's always someone who wants to destroy it afterwards. The first thing that Donald Trump was doing after Obama was kicked out of the White House was destroying Obamacare. Yeah, so it's very reactionary. It's not goal-oriented. There's no vision behind it. But you can still wonder, because in this story of Simone de Beauvoir, you feel this repetition of construction and destruction, and it's an endless thing that is endless kind of going on, and you lose kind of faith. Yeah. But the good thing, Steven Pinker showed in his work and his research that you can talk about a society that shows progress. So there's less war, there's less abuse of women, there's better education, there's all kind of things going on that are truly becoming better. Yeah. So my tip is, the third one, engage with a society because it is worthwhile doing. The only thing, and that's I think the big pitfall of this progress, what Steven Pinker also showed, is that this progress is very slow. So it goes beyond a generation. So the only thing what I want to say here, everything we want to kind of contribute to society, maybe we ourselves do not experience. That's strange, isn't it? So, but in that case, we have to rely to science and to data and to all kind of things that makes us understand that we're on the right track. And that's social design for me. You have to be aware, or you have to be kind of capable, making a distinction what was just a lucky shot, or was something with a specific goal in mind that really could happen. So, that's my tip 3, and that also relates to how you run your business. So it's not that you just say, "Oh yeah, I want to do this assignment on society, and I want to be paid for it like that." That doesn't work like that. So it's a completely other way of dealing with economics. It takes 3 years. So for us, it took 3 years. So the mean average kind of project, or the mean average time it takes to kind of start doing a project is 3 years. And that was also the case with redesigning psychiatry. Okay. We're at number 4 now. How many minutes? Okay. Hannah Arendt. So I was impressed, so I saw this documentary on her on television, and she was saying we forgot, as society, we forgot about how to negotiate with each other. We're not negotiating on values anymore, but we negotiate on ideas. And I think that's true. So we tend to think that society is about solutions, and that you have to kind of debate or negotiate if that solution is a good solution. But what she told me is no, before you can even have a debate on the solution, you have to understand the values underlying that solution. Were there kind of collective kind of values? Were there individual values? Is there maybe a conflict between them? So what she showed us is we have to work together in a completely different way, and we have to put things on the table that we as designers often do not put on the table, like values. I don't know if you have ever put a value on the table, but I didn't do it, so 15 years ago, it was completely new to me. And in redesigning psychiatry, this is crucial to where we are now. And Nienke Tromp, is Nienke also here? Yeah, Nienke is there. So she's doing research on how to do it. So I'm now talking about something I learned from Nienke and what we implemented in our redesigning psychiatry project. And now I understand, before you can say anything about what transition you have kind of in mind from a likely society to a desired society, write down those values and agree on those values. If you agree on those values, 99% of the job is done. Okay, that's the fourth one. So, values, values, values. That's it. And the last one, so there's our Jet Bussemaker. I think so. I was not even. I liked her when she was a minister, but she was also responsible. So, do you still remember the Participation Society? Do you still remember that word or not? She was kind of like partly responsible for it, and now she's assigned a professor in Tilburg. And in the newspaper of February this year, she said, "Yeah, that participation society. No, that's a stupid idea. Stupid idea. So we should distance from it." What the fuck? So first we are steered in a direction that you already beforehand know this is not going to work, because the idea is too simple. You can't just ask the responsibility from any citizen to participate in a society. Look at literature, it's just in there. Yeah? So what I try to say here is that maybe doing social design is to distance from power and power systems. So we are really we're constantly longing for who's in charge, who's my client, who's going to pay. Maybe social design is exactly about the opposite. Distance from the people who are in power, because these people keep these kind of constructs up in the air. And I think we have to distance from these constructs. So I like it. I like to see kind of social design more as something that you do under the radar, and then it's not so sexy to sell because people say, "Yeah, what are you doing?" "Yeah, I'm under the radar." Yeah, that's terrible. But it's better to be under the radar than kind of like up in the air where people can just shoot you down. Yeah, and again, social design is not about us designers. Social design, the only goal we have is society. Yeah, so it's not so. Try not to fight for acknowledgement from society, because it takes too long. You just take the responsibility for society. So, and you have to be smart, and you have to play with it. And that's why I like this sculpture so much. So you know this one by Maurizio Cattelan. He used everything, so he uses his understanding in having a critique on, so this is the, what is it? What's it called? The Beurs, the stock exchange in Milano. And what he did, because you can't see it that well, so it looks only like the middle finger, but it's not. It's a sculpture of a hand, but unfortunately 4 fingers are broken. Yeah? Like the old classic Italian sculptures. And he just told them, yeah, it's just a classic, come on, it's just a classic sculpture. And coincidentally, those fingers are not there. And this is what it is. And I think this is fantastic. So I think this light kind of activism, under the radar, but also completely aware of those kind of power mechanisms, that's the way to go. So, and then when you go to redesign psychiatry, because we're working with a large group of people, so it's the university, it's philosophers, it's psychologists, it's institutes on psychiatrical well-being. So it's this group of, I think, already 100 people, and we told ourselves, okay, we're not going to defend the organizations we work for, we're going to see what's possible. Yeah? Again, we're not going to solve the problem of today, but we see what we can make somewhere over there. And we're just doing it. I'm saying it's not an easy process, don't get me wrong, but I think we're managing with all kind of like the good things and the bad things, but in the end we already exist for 5 years. So we managed to get finance. And it's another type of financing for already 5 years with a group of 10 kind of people doing research. And one of the philosophers, he was kind of contributing to the project, he said, it's so funny, but I can do kind of I can do better research within this project Redesign Psychiatry as I can do at my own university. So that's strange, isn't it? It's a funny world. So I think the message is that we all want to be happy, of course, but in creating something that matters, the happiness only kind of comes at the end. So design and social design is not about entertainment. It's not about pleasure. It's about the true thing. And the true thing, it's just like, yeah, it can be everything. But at the end, when you manage to do something and when you created something of meaning from a fundamental theoretical point of view, then you're there. You have this starting point, you have this basis, and you can defend it, yeah? You have to defend it. And through that, you can defend society. So this is where I want to stop. And thank you all.
Thanks for sharing these humble advices. Which one was most valuable for you? Because I saw a lot of you writing. Which one did you like?
I really liked the tip about being realistic and also being patient. However, it's a challenge, I think.
Yeah. How come?
Well, if you're working in a studio, what he says, finance is always very, very short, and with governments, they have to do tenders, and then you cannot be at because of the only short period, you cannot join the project anymore. So you really have to think about these new ways of financing this project. So.
Yeah. How do you do that, Matthijs?
No, you're completely right. But also there, you can just like slowly change everything, isn't it? So I still remember we had to apply for something that was like a tender for the government. And you could kind of win 200 points. So it was kind of assessed with points. And then based on the assessment, you were a winner or not. And based on our kind of approach, so we were not kind of chosen, yeah? And we were wondering how many points did we win, and they said 0. 0 out of 200. And I think that's exactly the case. So often the government asks for something different, but they still use the old kind of parameters to do the judgments with. So there's still a lot of work to be done. I fully agree, but we should all kind of continue kind of like changing that whole idea about how we should organize society, yeah.
Okay. Are there any questions also to the previous speakers? It seems already quite a while ago, but you might recall.
Shall I hold? Okay. It's a long question, though, because I want to sketch some context.
I need to cut you short. We are running out of time, so if you could keep it just one short question.
Yeah. Considering tenders, often there's no space for having a lengthy research phase or having a good evaluation phase afterwards, especially in the context where I work, which is multimedia. How do you create that space within a tender? How do you convince a client that that space is needed?
And I guess you would like to pose that to Matthijs? Or I guess Neele might want to answer that as well?
What do we all have to say about this? Yeah. Well, I think it depends, because what I agree fully with Matthijs is that if you focus on your goal or the values that you, as, I don't know, whatever group of stakeholders have, then often, well, the assignment could change during execution. And I think one of the ways to handle that, or handle it already at forehand, was, for example, the tender process at the mobility services, where the municipality's team was so, well, value-based, actually. They were so eager to do it right that they could not be influenced by whatever happened around them, also in their own organization. Because there were lawsuits, there were wethouders who were thinking differently, there was the media who was making a mess out of this, there was the old supplier who was, but they just stood strong. That was really good. In that case, it was just what that tender needed. But in other cases, for example, we're working now on a project for social services, where we try to sort of well, actually we put in a plan of action that was sort of with their words, but with our approach. And then while we're doing it, they sort of saw, oh, this is actually really what we needed, because it had the same content.
Tweaking
secretly.
the system a bit.
Yeah.
Is there anyone, a policymaker in the room? Anyone responsible for these tenders? Who has some ideas? Yeah, there is one. There's always one. That's very brave of you. So how could you do differently? Or should you even do? Yeah, okay, I'm going to hand it over, but please don't be too lengthy.
Actually, we are trying to do the, I'm a designer myself, so we are trying to do the approach from the ministry. But it's quite hard, because you also have to deal with the organizations that do this for us, you know, and these are all these procedures we also have to deal with. So I very much empathize with the people at the municipality. It's quite hard to do this the right way, because I think we have the right goal, but like the whole system is working against you. So yeah.
Still some challenges to conquer then. I would like to thank you all for joining these best practices. Please give them another hand.